It may sound strange to say, but I think you could call war a creative endeavor. The way you deploy troops, the way that you maneuver them, what troops you choose to use, these things are all subjective. There isn't a definitive right and wrong way. There's strategies that work and strategies that don't. Some approaches pair up against others better. It's a simplification, but there's a rock paper scissors thing going on there where a stalwart defensive general is probably going to be outmaneuvered by an aggressive maneuver general. We can look at history and we can find all kinds of examples. Ferdinand Foch from the First World War, a famous forward kind of charger, hard defender, a very linear thinker, fought the frontier battles and just charged right up the front line, the center of the front line of the German army. Then you've got maneuver generals like Erwin Rommel, famous for moving around his opponents, for being where he wasn't expected, for moving much faster than was anticipated, and getting behind his opponents. And this is going back pretty far in time, but if you think about ancient generals like Alexander the Great, you see a whole other kind of leadership leading from the front where, he'd wear this audacious, colorful armor and lead cavalry charges, the famous Macedonian cavalry charging his enemies into his phalanx. There's all different. There's lots of different ways to approach warfare, and wargame is obviously a video game, obviously not the best kind of place to explore approaches to generalship, but it's a complicated game with a lot of options for players, and I think we can learn something from watching the way people engage in wargame matches, especially competitive high-tier matches. One weird trick, and I have been playing wargame for a very long time, and we've honed an aggressive maneuver kind of strategy that I think is a little bit uncommon in the way that high-tier players approach the game. Obviously, I should say we're not really high-tier players. There's a whole echelon of players out there with 4,000 or 5,000 games and 80% win ratios, and we're not that. We don't play in tournaments, but we play a lot, and I think we're a competitive team. And what I'd like to point out with this game in particular is that while our opponents weren't defensive, they were linear. What I mean by that is they charged, they were aggressive, and they pushed a front, but it was always the same front. There wasn't a lot of maneuver or flanking in how they approached attacking us. Now, what I see in most competitive, high-tier wargame matches is a strategy where you establish a wide front and you're trying to lure your opponent into exposing individual units, and then you're trying to kill those units without taking losses yourself. It kind of feels like a World War I kind of situation where there's not a lot of change in where your units are. They move very short distances, forward, backward, to take advantage of exposed enemy units and then to pull back behind your lines to safety. That's not exactly how Trick and I approach the game. We prefer to hold the initiative and force our opponents to redeploy their forces in reaction to our earlier deployments, which means, you know, we have them on the back foot, and we're forcing them to react to us, basically. I guess you could say it's a matter of strategy versus tactics, or dynamic strategy versus dynamic tactics. The wide front, slow grind approach, I think, is primarily a tactical one. You make your preliminary strategic decisions, you set up your line, and then you wait. Your opponent exposes himself, you kill a unit. You see one of your units is about to be exposed, you withdraw. Maybe you counter with nearby units, but generally I don't see a lot of wide, long maneuvers in these games. These high tier games. Trick and I tend to make our dynamic decisions on the strategic level. Large maneuvers that force, like I said, that force our opponents to react to us. I'm not sure how tactically proficient we are. Trick is extremely skilled at moving tanks around, although you don't see a lot of that in this game. His tank micro is very tight. I don't play with tanks very often, but I would say that my infantry maneuver is pretty good. I tend to get behind people with infantry. But I think when I watch other players play on the tactical level, I'm often kind of, I don't know if jealous is the right word, but I admire what I see them doing, because I'm not sure that I could do that myself. But let's get to this match. The map is Hell's Highway. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's a long, narrow valley with wooded hills on either side of a narrow road network with a city in the middle. Who was it that said, "Get there firstest with the mostest"? Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was a cavalry commander in the Confederate Army during the American Civil War. Not surprising that a cavalry commander would have this philosophy, but it's extremely true. It holds a lot of weight in wargame matches, especially this map, where there's a large city placed smack dab in the middle of the map, equidistant from each team's spawn. So I guess you could say there's just a mad dash into the center of the map with as many men as you can spare. There's a real brawl in this game, and we'll get into that shortly. So both teams, oops, let's slow this down. So both teams, I should say, sent a lot of men into the city in the beginning. See, we've got 4 squads of I forget what's in here. Anyway, there's 8 squads in total. Am I wrong? No, there's 8 squads and then 4 squads of AA troops, and then there's 4 squads of helicopter-borne infantry on the Op 4 side. Then on Blue 4, I've got 4 riflemen, 4 Navy SEALs. Trick has got 9 squads of Commando Marines and 3 squads of Legion. Looks like he's called up. Excuse me. Oh, there might actually be some Chaucers and those VAB T20s. So it's going to be a real slog in the city. And for the first 7 minutes or so of the game, there's just a brutal battle all through this road. Obviously, that's the road that we're both charging down. So we'll just zoom in a little bit. So I deploy first on either side of the road. Trick deploys on the road and then moves into the city's buildings. His Mistrals are on the front line now, which is obviously not ideal. Trick has set up 2 AMXs with cannons, the recon pieces, and 2 squads of Milans to cover the right flank. So far, they're doing pretty good work. At the moment, it seems like we brought the most men, so we're probably going to take the city. They deployed some tanks, as you can see on the right. They engaged the missiles and the AMX recon pieces, which punch way above their weight, I might add. Their 105 gun really can take out tanks. It's a fantastic unit. So the Commando Marines and the Legion are pushing up. Navy SEALs are on their left. I think my riflemen aren't dead. I thought they got wiped out. This Commando Marine unit is getting mixed in with, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that unit, and it kind of whittles them down. But as you can see, we're pretty much set to take the city. This is the beginning of one of my first maneuvers. I like to move up around the left side of the city and try to set up a defensive line here. Also a roadblock here. I find my opponents are often thinking about the battle in the city, and if I can set up an ambush before they're in the city, I can get them while they're still in their vehicles and inflict very heavy casualties. So this is the beginning of that maneuver. See, I'm screening with anti-air and expendable Humvees. The meat of my forces is an Abrams, a Bradley platoon, and a Marine platoon and landing vehicles, supported by a Vulcan. So that's the end of those tanks, as you can see. The AMXs and the Milans cleaned them up. Even though these are only Milan F1s, Trick tends to put them on the flanks to deal with lighter vehicles like those T-55s. So the Commando Marines have kind of been chewed up. It's just the Navy SEALs and the line infantry in the city now. As you can see, my maneuver is coming in from the side, screening with Humvees, charging with Marines, covering with the Bradley and the Abrams. My Marines are going to move up and take this building to support my Navy SEALs. The Humvees push out their support elements in the rear. People tend to underestimate their 50 cal guns, but they can hurt light vehicles. The Marines are now in line with the Navy SEALs, eliminating the second last squad of OP-4 infantry. The Commandosi will eventually mingle with the Navy SEALs and get whittled down. So let's focus on... Dodged a bullet there. Let's focus on this maneuver for the moment. These units have to push up to here. And like I said, set up a line and a roadblock. That's the next step. There they go. Now I have to work with what I have in this situation. I would like to charge with more infantry, but I really need to leave my infantry in this town in case the roadblock doesn't set up before this road, becomes occupied. So I have to work with the Humvees, the Abrams, and the landing vehicles. I guess my Bradleys died. Trick also has infantry in the city, as you can see. He's moving them up now. Things are pretty static on the right. Trick is a very, very diligent logistics player. As you can see, he's brought up 2 commands, whereas they are only now bringing up their 3rd command. He'd also want me to mention, I have never bought a forward operating base. We operate with 1, and he pays for it, because he's a good man and a team player. As the landing vehicles move up to set up the roadblock, I'm comfortable moving my Marines into this building. My riflemen will stay back to cover them until they're set up. Still no movement on the right flank. So, having established this line in the woods and this roadblock here, the game really settles in at this point. They bomb us with these Evias and the Hawks. They attack us on this line over and over and over again. And to be honest, they have marginal success. I'm going to speed the game up at this point and focus just on this region. We'll move on. Oops. We'll move on to the right as Trick pushes up through these woods. And he does do that reasonably soon. But for now, let's just watch the back and forth in 3 times speed. So I should have been bringing up reinforcements at this point. I don't think I've called them in yet, which I can see now was a problem. We have 30 infantry, 4 fighting vehicles, and a tank on this line. They're coming at us with 50 special forces. We're going to get chewed up. These commando marines come in to support, and I think that saves us. And here's Trick with his VAB T-20s. These units are amazing. They extend the killing range of your infantry by about 30% with their autocannons, maybe even more. I think their autocannons have a range of 1 kilometer or so, whereas the average shoulder-mounted rocket from infantry has a range of about 700. So they really let you push farther, and they add a little bit of firepower to infantry fights, even in the woods, where they can't fire anywhere near their maximum range. This Abrams is really helpful. It provides a lot of punch, and as you can see, It is basically indestructible. It provides a lot of punch to my infantry. I can move it to serious fights, and every time it fires its cannon, it'll kill 3 or 4 guys. So, I'm just going to pause it for a second here again. Let's call this my second maneuver of the game. These forces are initially, we're going to try to move here to kill any command or logistics units that they happen to find in these woods, and to set up a roadblock here. I mean, I wouldn't tell their families this, but they were a suicide force. The idea with this 20-man Delta Force squad, 2 LAV scouts, a Stinger squad, and then 2 rifle squads, they're just a disruption force. I'm hoping to kill a command and maybe a few platoons that are driving down the road. Get them thinking about these woods instead of the front line. Again, I'm trying to hold the initiative. I'm trying to prevent my opponent from establishing momentum. It's kind of like we're in a boxing match. And Op 4 is charging right down the center, throwing lots of straight punches, keeping the aggression up, but really just attacking down the middle. Whereas we're kind of bouncing around, they call it outfighting, throwing wide, looping hooks, trying to slip around Op 4's kind of tight defenses. You can kind of think about it like a Mike Tyson-style fighter versus Muhammad Ali. Anyway, that's enough boxing. So this flank, just so you know, because I didn't record this happening. It drove down this road to here, deployed in cover, and moved along this ridge line to where it kind of assembled into a line formation and moved into the enemy positions. I scouted that area with a Kiowa, and as a preliminary force, I landed my Delta Force just to make sure that the road and the area was clear for the infantry to drive in. So there they are, assembled in their line. Delta Force leading the charge. Riflemen in reserve. On the left flank, LAV scouts, which are going to charge, probably without a lot of support, right into there. So that was the plan. It's not exactly how it played out. As you can see, the Delta Force encounter helicopters, and the Stingers, because they're in heavy woods, aren't able to support them. The Humvees and the rifles move up to help with their MGs. As this is happening, we're going to slow it down. As this is happening, my Abrams dies to Commandosi. The Chasseurs are just whittled away, and they're the last thing on the line. So there's nothing in these woods anymore. We do have some light defenses in the city, but there's basically nothing between their infantry and our command. It was around this point that I elected to move my flank rather than up. I moved it down in order to hit these infantry in the rear. Ideally, we would have infantry set up here to pincer them, but needs must when the devil drives. I decided to move my scouts alone into these woods. Sometimes there's a command in here. As you can see, there's AA and a lot of logistics. So hopefully I can get into their bellies and do some damage. Things were pretty desperate at this point. As you can see, they're in the lead by about 200 points, and we're losing our left flank. Mortars call in a fire mission and miss. The AMX is down to 1 hit, and it's reversing away, blasting away with its autocannon, gets into the city, turns around like a chump. Oh, that missile missed, thank God. And the AMX is safe. So the Delta Force and the Riflemen are engaging. The Delta Force are wiped out. The Riflemen are going to get chewed up soon. But I've managed to split their forces. This Aardvark does not do much. Does nothing. And I think it dies. Oh, no, it survived. So now we have Legion on site. And I think these are probably Chasseurs. As you can see, the flank doesn't do much. In here, we kill their AA. And don't do much else. But, you know, we get them to deploy their infantry, pull back their Scots. They're thinking about their rear instead of their front. The Chasseurs and the Legion clean up that forward squad. This squad pulls back. Now, I'm going to pause it for a second again. This is, I guess we could call it Trick's first maneuver. And it was a successful one. He moved his forces, I think they were, yeah. So he left the recon pieces and the missile infantry here. And he hooked around on the right and came down like this. It looks like his AA infantry have encountered a pair of Scott 2s. They're engaging with their machine guns, and thankfully its cannon is experiencing an optical failure. They have 2 minutes to kill it. He's deployed his Legion, and he's going to move up and try to kill their command and get into their bellies. We're always trying to attack people where they're weak, unlike our opponents who are always trying to attack us where we are strong. So, let's see how his flank goes. Legion leading the charge against a vehicle with a tow. I haven't seen that before. There's not a lot to stop them here. He can be basically as aggressive as he wants. I'm just scouting with the Kiowa on the right. I think it's about to die. Yep. Not much happening on the left. Op 4 is reinforcing their special forces. We're trying to establish our line. Oh, while I was over there, Trick killed their command and the tow vehicle. That's it. Okay. So let's pause it here, and I will talk for just a brief second about the fact that at this point in the game, 20 minutes after it has started, we finally have our firm line outside Delta. We have infantry set up here and here, and that gives us a kill zone with 3 angles of fire. We can shoot out from either of these woods and up from the town. That makes this field a serious killing zone, and it means that it's very hard to flank us because we have these firm lines backed up against the mountains here. So this is also a killing zone. There's no cover on the side of that mountain. And unfortunately, we don't have anything like that on the left. The left is where they continue to push for the rest of the game. Meanwhile, we do our maneuvers on the right. So let's speed it up a little bit. Legion push up. AA moves up behind them. Command comes back to get us the income from Delta. At this point, I called in Sirius AA, 2 Vulcans, and 2 AA infantry squads. Here, I think Trick pushed a little bit too aggressively. Maybe not. I would have stayed back here. He chose to charge up to this crossroads, which probably makes sense. Let's see how he does. Ooh, that hurt. Those rocket planes are serious. They're very accurate, and they do a lot of damage. So as you can see, we don't have the advantage of the cleared mountainside over here. So we're dealing with flanks. I'm not going to try to pronounce that, but the riflemen are engaging it, and as you can see, they're pretty seriously outgunned. We have mortar fire, and we have Marines and landing vehicles coming up behind them to support. Here, the Legion got chewed up pretty bad, and this bomb may kill them. Yes. So let's talk for a second about these planes. Again, I love these rocket planes. Very effective. I don't think that NATO gets them in the same way. But anyway, the Aviras, which are basically IL-102 clones, were a real serious tool for OPFOR in this game. As you can see, they call up a rock. No idea if that's pronounced right. Pretty sure it's not. Which is basically an unarmored Buratino. A thermobaric bomb launcher. Just covers an area in fire, and it becomes a real problem for us on the left. I don't think we end up killing it. But I think that those two tools, the Aviras and the Buratino clone, let's call them the IL-102s and the Buratinos, which is basically what they are. I think they really speak to the mindset of OPFOR in this game. They just kept pounding away at our front door, and we knew they were going to do it. And it's not that they were bad at it. Like, as you can see, they keep the game tied up really effectively, and eventually they actually pull into the lead. It's serendipitous that they called in the Buratino when they did, because we had just called up really serious AA. On our comms, we were thinking about, a stable front line now, so we decided to set up AA positions on either side. So it's good for them that they called in artillery, which is going to do something very similar to their bombers, which is mess up clusters of infantry. As you can see, Trick's push over here, which would not have been any safer over here, just got annihilated by the bombs. But that was really all they could do. They could disrupt formations of infantry with artillery or bombs, mostly bombs, and then they could move up their own infantry behind those bombs or behind that artillery and destroy our disrupted infantry. It's an effective tactic, but strategically it doesn't demonstrate a lot of flexibility. And I think that's ultimately why we won. Oh, I can't believe those planes keep getting away. But as you can see, my Stingers are moving up. We'll have a little more AA in the area. So at this point on the left, we're holding our own, but it doesn't last. Okay, so I watched my recon chopper get killed by this Maz. So I decided to deploy Delta Force back here, and then, hike them over the mountains to kill the Moz, to clear the way for attacks into Foxtrot. So that's what's going on there. And yeah, over here, again, just a persistent infantry grind. I think Trick reestablishes some defenses over here, and we'll just speed it up again, because again, this was just an extremely repetitive. Let's see, here's the first Buratino shot. There's my Aardvark trying to counter that infantry. Notice how Op Force split the platoon, moved squads in different directions. Once the bombs fell, reassembled the platoon. Very, very savvy infantry micro. These were good players. Yeah, and then a bomb destroys my my platoon. So here we have infantry moving up. Thankfully, yeah, oh yeah, Trick is just reinforcing that like crazy. Okay, so I kill the Moz, and they're freaking out, because they know that this clears the way for me to establish a base of operations here, attack down these ridges, down this valley, down this ridge, into Foxtrot. So they deploy 2 Scots here, but they don't manage them very well. Yeah, over here the grind just continues. It is just a persistent. They don't attack much on the right. Mostly it's on the left. And again, I think largely that's because of this open area, which we can keep eyes on and turn into a killing zone whenever they try to move through it. So I've called up reinforcements for my Delta Force, a pair of AA choppers, and a pair of Chinooks with more Delta Force in them. So I'll be hitting Foxtrot down those routes that I discussed with 40 Delta Force and 2 AA choppers in cover. And I have 2 empty Chinooks and another recon chopper on the left as a diversion. I'm going to move these up and make sure they're seen, whereas these guys, as you can see, are moving as close to the edge as they can possibly move. So I'm hoping to have them shift their weight here while I move in there. But that takes a little bit of time to set up. So let's look at the front a little bit more. Not much has changed on the front. As you can see, they're still hitting us with artillery and bombs and pushing up Special Forces infantry. We've managed to keep them pretty well in check along this line. Oof, that hurt. But yeah, they just keep going at it. There's even more Special Forces infantry coming up at us. We're dealing with some riflemen and Humvees and Legion and some Bradleys. I think by this point we were running out of infantry pretty severely, and as you can see, they have a 300-point lead. It's not an insignificant problem. And like right now, see, they've got us down to 20 men, 2 Humvees, and they have more than 60 and a lot of much better APCs. Do we get this OV right? Yes. See, by this point, we've brought up AS fighters to try to take out their bombers, an Eagle and a Raphael. So their only real ace in the hole at this point is the Rock or the Buratino. Again, it's not quite a Buratino. It's not on a T-72 chassis. So I shouldn't call it that. But that's how I think about it. So yeah, their lead is increasing, 425 points. Uncontested here. Let's see how this Aardvark fares. Took out one of the platoons. Not bad. Trick brought up some artillery. So they've gotten dug in here. They're in the building. Now we have to dislodge them, or we have to shift our weight. See, again, there's fundamentally, I think there's two reactions to a problem like this. One is attack it head on and just try to do what the enemy's doing better with more men. Or you can do stuff like this. Push your Delta Force in around their back. Do so cautiously, you know, with a scout force and then reinforcements. More reinforcements in the back. But yeah, I prefer to work around my problems in Wargame. See here, they send some stuff out and just pull these guys back. They were a distraction, so the more they chase me, the further they are away from what matters, which is this. See, I move my guys up in single groups, and then once they're ready to assault, they group up into platoons of 2 squads. Trick is doing the same thing. He's shifting his weight to the right with Commando Para, Commando Marines, Chasseurs, more Chasseurs. He's got a real infantry force pushing up on the right here. The Delta Force are about to break cover and ambush their rear spawn. I had no idea their command was here, but that's usually where it is. So I encounter AA, ballistic AA, and helicopters. I move my attack helicopters in too late. Still don't have eyes on their command, but I know it's close because it's moving. These Delta Force are moving up in case it was deployed up here somewhere. I think at this point I have eyes on it. And these Delta Force are going to move up. Let's see how Trick is doing. So that Buratino just narrowly missed his deployed infantry, which would have been a real mess. Delta Force push up between the miniguns and the Chinooks and the Delta Force squad. We kill their command, neutralizing their ability to call in units and, more importantly, to call in their bombers, which, considering Trick's units here are way beyond our air cover, that's a good thing. Also, at this point, they're down to 1 command, which is here. And we know it's there because my LAVs pushed in to this section of Echo earlier in the game. So there's not a lot of confusion about where we have to be pushing to with our last units. My Delta Force, for some reason, are chasing these Scots. I should have been moving them up through these woods, but thankfully Trick was on the ball. Also, thankfully, you can see the scorched earth here. You can see they've really just been trying to make a wall of fire to keep their command safe. And both times Trick was just out of range. We did get lucky there. He dodged both of those incendiary rounds, and now it's out of ammunition, and I think, oh no, they have a fob that I haven't captured. Anyway, these Delta Force are doing a disruption thing, just trying to draw their attention while Trick hunts down their last command. I think by this point we know it's there because it's moving. We haven't seen it yet. Now we see it, and now we see why I really love the VAB T20s. Boom. Won the game for us. Just an outstanding ability to push out the effective range of infantry. Keeping autocannons next to your infantry squads is just so useful in so many ways. So I think the lesson here has something to do with broad maneuvers, maintain a kind of momentum on the battlefield. And that's important. Initiative really, most of the time, dictates the winner of a battle. if you're forcing your opponent to react to you, he's not putting the time in to thinking about a way to really destroy you. He's just kind of throwing up defenses and responding. And at a high enough level, if you get him reactive enough, if you can keep him in that reactive headspace, you can start to throw feints quite effectively, where he'll think that you're about to do something, start responding to it, and then your actual attack takes place elsewhere after you've drawn away his forces from the area you plan to push into. These weren't bad players. In fact, they were extremely good players. They managed to hold a line for most of the game. Basically, at the 7-minute mark, we established a line outside of Delta, and they held us there the whole time, especially on the left. On the right, at the very end, we pushed through with a wide Delta Force flank and a close range. It was kind of like my Delta Force were like a haymaker, like an over-the-top, really wide, heavy punch. And Trick's flank into, I forget what the zone is, his flank into their last command was like a tight hook, close to the body, defended himself quite well. His troops weren't really at risk, whereas all of my Delta Force guys died. They were really a Hail Mary punch to his tight left hook. But they only threw straight punches. They were technical, they were effective, but when it came down to it, they weren't creative. The closest thing they had to creative strategies was, as I mentioned, their use of artillery and bombers, which they were very good with. They would disrupt our line, and then they would push into that disruption, and often win those engagements. And that also netted them a significant points lead. If they had continued to grind it out and we hadn't sniped their commands, we would have lost. We thought that we were fighting for a draw at that point. We really didn't think we had won that game. And you could say we got lucky, but the truth is, we moved their commands around. We threatened the left, so they moved the command to the right. And then we hit them where they were vulnerable on the right, because we had made the left an untenable place for them to be. All in all, I think it was an effective strategy. It's what we do in almost every game we play. And we've gotten pretty good at it, and I gotta say it works, well, according to the numbers, about 70% of the time, which isn't bad. I hope you enjoyed the game and my comments on it, and we'll see you next time.